Hello there guys, this is just another A-star example sketchbook from an A2 photography exam question this year, Aspects of the Landscape. Really super book, all the way through really thorough, and what I'll do is I'll put at the end in some of the really amazing images that were taken right at the end. This says here, effective sketchbook practice, similar to how some of the other sketchbooks are started with mood board, looking at good examples just to inform then how you then sort of take your work forward. Visual project plan, just explain about what the exam aim was, and also just a little bit of start of the research. It just helps if you can show the examiner what you intend to do before you actually then go and do all your work, so you can then talk about it later and evaluate your progress as you go. James Revilius was one of the people set by the exam question, as I believe Faye Godwin was for the aspects of the landscape question, and Charlie Waite was another artist that she found herself. Bill Brandt that she looked at mainly for composition purposes, which she then goes on to analyse the compositions really in depth on here, not just using the rule 3, but just using that as a means to talk about and develop her work. First starting points, it's really clearly labelled if you look all the way through, the same formats put on most of the pages where it says starting points, then it has a little comparison or a connection to the artist, and then just explains and picks out the best images that she's going to take forward. All these images here I've got clearly tabbed, corrected and raw. Really helps the examiner to see which stage you're at, and also if you can make yourself a little cheeky key like that, it just really helps to show what you'll do to correct and which ones you're going to take forward. Even though a lot of people think it's a bit old school, it's always a good idea to correct, mark, select and edit your contacts before you take it forward to show that selection process. That's the sort of the heart of photography, relies on that selection and that selection of good images. It also shows the fact that the amount you've taken, and if you're looking over with like your teachers or peers or whatever, you might have missed something. So it's always good to look back over your contacts to see if there's anything else that can be capitalised on. Other couple of starting point sets. This time it's just the starting points on this side, and then the best images are explained on this one here. Again, the compositions looked at, and it's then just talking about the similarities between her work and Bill Brandt's compositional value in his work. And this bit here is just the starting points 3, the book part. Sorry, I had to stop the video then. Just a little bit of action going on in the other classroom. Moving on to the next bit. All right, best images here. This was actually from a series where she took pictures of books which she was burning in the landscape that were found in an old abandoned caravan in the landscape that she was going to take photographs from. She also then, like Faye Godwin, started to print and layer her images together using newspaper and things that she found from that location. Just going over to the next page here, this was quite a bit of a lucky found. She found a leaflet which was showing that the areas which she was going to go to, which she then used and laid in work later on. It just shows as well on here, she just laid over just with a little cheeky piece of acetate like that, where she went to and the places that she visited. This one here, Dimmersdale, these shots were to get more decorative and textural shots compared to some of the other ones which were more based around James Revilius. And these again, best images. Look at the artist, looking at her work, comparing the two. If you can do as well, when you're explaining, try and drop in little bits of print screens from Windows, or if you're using Mac, if that's your sort of thing, just the settings that you used. What was the aperture, what was your speed, what was the ISO one? If you can then say why you did those things, it just shows that technical ability. This bit here, a little bit of acetate's being used just to layer and compare images together before actual Photoshop's even involved at any sort of point. And then another starting point set here, which says starting point 6, sunset fields, which is where she tried to capitalise on later evening light to create some more interesting silhouettes and shadows and what have you. This bit here, again, another little thing where she's using things in the landscape to develop her work, which is where she found an old plough key, which she then took photographs of the landscape through the plough key to reveal that as an unusual aspect to the work. Turn over, it does help every so often to have a couple of pages where there's no writing, it's just literally a really good document of what you've taken pictures of, and it just shows your flair then for that initial starting point. And then an explanation as why those images were picked. Next set here, looking at, again, different lighting conditions, hasn't just used the same place, same lighting conditions. There's lots of variety in there, not just with the viewpoint of composition, with the time that the photos were taken as well. And these revealed really interesting sort of like almost like silhouette compositions, which she capitalised on later on in the use of radiograms, which you'll see in a bit. Art connection images, really strong links to good traditional sort of like solid photographers like Carl Blossfeldt. And this little bit here, which was a bit of an unusual comparison there, she actually takes that later on and uses that as an actual shape to layer in with the images that she develops. Starting point 8. Croxton, it's just an abbey up the road from here. Really cracking shots taken, really interesting, sort of like, if you could call it a prop to use in the elite landscape as it is, but she got some really cracking shots there. Also at the bottom here, really good thing to remark on is the fact that she's talked about bad images and why it didn't work. So, you know, it just shows that the fact that you are capable of analysing what went wrong at times. Then we start getting into development, that idea sort of experiments with looking at the shape of that plough key, and it almost became a bit like a bee honeycomb, or looking at sort of like patchwork patination that could occur naturally in the environment. Other little artist connections there all the way through, really strong. So for AO1, if you're still thinking about old A2, not the new A level that's coming in, it's really good for AO1, that researching and developing key artist connections on that one. Next bit's there. She then takes, there's the actual little plough key, little jobby there that she found. She included that in the book there just to give it a little bit of relevance. And on this page here, the hexagonal development is where she then created her own honeycombs and sort of shapes using that key and the photographs from the key to then create new landscapes and new aspects. This one was just like where she experimented a little bit with textiles and shiny fabrics to see if that could be developed any further. And she did look at the idea of patchwork quilting. Just in the end, she decided to develop more so the idea of photography. It was just a little experiment to see how that would go. Other little developments, she's explained on Photoshop, print screened, explained like the sort of the shapes she's used, how she then used it, and the fact that she even used and made her own patterns for pattern stamping. So there's that technical approach there as well. And the layering that's being done is not just slapdash, it's not thoughtless, it's carefully assembled. She has actually thought about what she's doing before she's just got straight in there and then hit the copy paste button. These ones here, again, a mixture of layers and trying to create that HDR effect, looking at different exposures, mainly using Topaz software, which is like sort of your poor man's HDR, but in this case, I think she still manages to achieve the look she's wanting to go for in the same sorts of style of Trey Ratcliffe and other super-duper HDR photographers. These ones here, looking at series and extended canvases, they're just ways of using the space to help you, using that composition to really push the idea further, and that's just one of the things that she does really well there. These extended canvases, they're just literal extensions into black space. Sometimes it could be white space depending on whatever works best for your images. Next one's crop joiners, just little croppings, quite relevant to Bill Brandt as well. I'm going to get my words out, Bill Brandt, where he has little croppings from environments just to show different sort of areas of interest. These ones flipped and combined images, again pretty straightforward ways of developing, but because the images were really good, nice quality in the first place, just really sets them off. And then arrangements, similar to those crop joiners from before, just putting the best bits of images together just to show the overall quality and showing the way that she would intend to present those if they were going to be presented as a final piece. And then these are just the colour arrangements she's wrote very clearly, just labelling them there. Next couple of pages, cellulose thinner examples, as well as then she's kept like the part which then created the print, and then printing into the books that she found in that landscape. That was just some of the other bits and bobs that she found, and these are more like little records and experimentations to show that she's capable on using stuff in real life, not just Photoshop. Then it takes a different stage after she does the layering and links to Kate Mellor's work. She then starts to look at layers in a traditional sense and starts to look at acetates. And you might not be able to get like the full justice from this from YouTube, but hopefully as the pages turn, you'll be able to see that each one has got a transparency layer that looks and creates a different segment of landscape. Then as that landscape turns over, it then builds up more and more sort of like layers until you get to the foreground. All that leads through, and that actually led to a photographic opportunity as well for her later on in the book, and that's just showing the process and the stage of them layers there. As turning the page there, it just goes to talk about Ansel Adams and then a little bit of local information about like the sort of the landscapes where she went, and then she went back as another set back to this place called the Blue Lagoon, which, believe it or not, is in Great Britain, and it's there's plenty of stuff for you to do your research on the old Tinternet. You'll see what it's all about. But that was a place of particular interest. And she went back there and really refined her approach. She took film images, and then she took the film images that were then developed back to that landscape and left them soaking in the nitrogen-rich waters to see what effect that would have on the actual photos themselves. Didn't quite give her the look she was going for, but nevertheless is still relevant because they're showing that the landscape itself has had a physical action on that photograph. But these are some real beauties. I really like these. These were taking the photos back into that blue-rich water just to create an unusual sort of like extra little development. Also found a little artist link to Michael Hughes. And that's his name, yeah, it is. All right, and then she goes on to explain her best images there. But literally showing the aspects of the landscape, something material about it, something about that, the chemical, as well as then showing an overall view of it. So you could even compare it to a bit of cheeky Leaf Friedlander as well, if you talk about multiple viewpoints. Mentioned earlier on about rayograms. These little rayograms in here, it's great to see darkroom processes. Like many schools, we've been hit by the budget gun, and we don't get any money for chemicals anymore, so any kind of film stuff is lovely. On here, she's using things that she found in those landscapes to create rayograms from. They were then used afterwards, whether she was splashing the water from that she picked up back onto the paper as well, just to create unusual little textural combinations there. And they were then photographed, scanned in again, and then used as layer material. Just knock the camera a bit. This is just saying about those acetate prints, and it just clearly goes through. Oh, that's the page I missed. Those are just the montages where she mixes her rayograms back into her landscape images there. And that's pretty much the end of her book as it goes from there. The only other thing that she does is she does talk about a summary of intentions and how the things changed. And the one thing which can't really be done justice because I haven't got them here, I'll stick them in at the end of the video, are these images, which are basically her best images from all the way through the book, printed off as enlargements. And that was her entire work. She didn't quite get the chance to create the patchwork quilt, but I think it more than had the effect she was looking for with the actual, these ones there, the ones with the little patchwork sort of hexagonal shapey things. Okay, I hope that helps, guys. Thanks.